Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Friday, which means it's time for a new how to bass tutorial. And today I'm going to show you how to make this sound. I'm also doing laundry, which is why I'm wearing a robe. So, this is an entirely self-contained citrus. I have a limiter on the master, which is preventing like tiny peaks, as you can see there. But other than that, the tone and the togetherness of it and pretty much everything about the sound is being controlled and created inside entirely one citrus. I was going to do something a bit more resample heavy today, but I figured I would actually try to keep it a bit more low key and explore a bit of the idea that I started with on a more recent how to bass, which was sort of multi-layered FM, but with like spreading it spectrally. And what I mean by that is the way that this works is that this citrus starts. This is what it sounds like without the effects. This is what it sounds like without the unison. Turn it a bit down, and then all the carriers are just sine waves, but they are at different positions. So like without the FM at all. It actually still kind of sounds like something because it's being distorted by the wave shaper inside the filter. And then the wave shaper inside this guy. But this is what it actually is. The three carriers are by default. So the first one's a sub, and the second one is the first one, and then the second one mid-range, and then the third one high frequency. Now, the purpose of doing this is I wanted to create different kind of FM textures on each different carrier and kind of have them layered together to create a more dense sort of FM structure. Usually when I do FM, I have one carrier and I do a whole bunch of crap to it with a bunch of different modulators, which you can do. That you know elicits quite interesting things. But this kind of layering concept is a bit new to me, and I did do some of this in how to. I forget honestly because I do so many of these, but it was a recent idea, and so I figured I would try and like go for it a little harder. So the first guy is doing that. Some of these guys also have volume modulation on it, so that they're kind of fading in against it. The first one is just on the whole time, and it's being modulated by a whole bunch of sine waves created by the oscillator, the harmonic created thing here, and then it's a bit higher frequency as well, 8 as opposed to 2, which means that it's because the fundamental tone, it means 8 is 2 octaves higher, yeah, and then a little bit of off tuneness with this, which makes it kind of move a little bit, like very slightly. If I put it too much, you can't hear it do it. It's really subtle. So that's what that dude is responsible for. Now the next one is the higher, slightly higher frequency. This one is at 8. So that's how high this guy would have been if it was just one, or rather this guy would have been if it was just one sine wave, what was called a saw wave. And it's being modulated by 4 levels, so it's actually lower than the fundamental in this case. And this is almost saw, and it's being tensioned, like tensed and skewed, just kind of moved around a whole bunch. And then again, also detuned slightly to kind of create a slight bit of motion. That's what that sounds like, full on, just straight up. And the reason why that sounds stupid in comparison to the reality of it is because I also, in here, I am doing index mapping on the pitch. So there's actually 3 octaves of this going on. I think 3 octaves. Either that or an octave and a fifth and then an octave. So with all the unison engaged. That's what that sounds like. And I think I might have done something special with the unison and the other guy. No, so this is just straight up. This guy is individual. So unison index mapping inside Citrus, and also Harmor does this too, is the idea that like on here you see this list of parameters, and each parameter has a list of modifiers, and the modifiers are the ways that we can change the parameter. And then in the unison index mapping, it allows us to change the parameter per unison voice. So this setup here is saying that these 3 voices are the same pitch. This voice is an octave higher, this voice is down again, this voice is another octave higher. Yeah, so this is straight up octaves, right? Because I changed the pitch range to be 2 octaves. By default, this knob it sets the pitch range for all the pitch-based effects, pitch-based modulations and whatnot. And in here, you can see that there's the middle line, and then there's the top and the bottom. The top from the middle of the top and is this range, and then the middle of the bottom is also that range. So this range says 1200 cents, which is just 1 octave. So 1 octave up, 1 octave down. So this guy, when I said to be 2 octaves, it's 2 octaves up, 2 octaves down, which means halfway through it is also an octave. The divisions here are divided into 12 sections so that you can do semitones when it's normally just a regular octave. It's still the same divisions when you're doing when you change the pitch range. So that's why this guy sounds the way that it does versus when there's no unison. Now you can see in the unison page here, I have none of the other unison parameters except for the volume are actually engaged, which means each individual oscillator is essentially responsible for its particular unison shenanigans. I like doing that because you have like ridiculous control over what you're doing in terms of unison, as opposed to just leaving it to chance of like the pitch and the phase on the whole thing being what you want. This is more important for the third guy, which is that pitch and this guy. So this also is used index mapped. You can see here the change, but the change is based on 9 voices. So with the 9 voices, it creates this kick-ass phase cancellation. So this is actually a big part of the hardness of the sound, because it's kind of soft and it's kind of hard. The hardness is created by this guy. Because I think I also messed with the phase in this one. Yeah, so I messed with the phase. So this is the starting phase of each individual voice in number 5. But number 6, the phase is solid, which means that the fact that there's pitch change, a very small amount of pitch change, because the pitch range you can see is really low. It starts off all of it perfectly in phase and not high enough pitch for the change to actually matter for a while anyway, until that happens. So every time you hit a note, you get this nice impact. And if you kind of mess with the FM, you can get rid of it, because the volume on this guy is also set to come on a little bit delayed versus on the carrier, yeah, versus the other guy. So like this has all the time. This guy comes on when you're moving, and this guy comes on slower. So that means that if you're automating it from down to up on an impact, you lose the impact. But if you automate it from down top to bottom on the impact, you get the biggest impact. So that's why the automation works the way that it does. And this is also I think actually just full on, just a triangle wave that's been tensed and skewed, just messed around with it. It wasn't really paying attention, honestly. Pretty high pitch, but not as high as the actual pitch itself, which is like 40, which is pretty high. And then at least 3 come together to form. So that's what it sounds like without sort of any more processing, except for the fact that in the first filter that I'm using here is not actually doing anything. It's just using it to distort it with the wave shaper that's built into Citrus. And then the next one, I'm actually just using it to be an EQ, because you can engage a filter type that's called a peak filter, and that's exactly what this type is in the EQ up here. Have I been doing this whole thing with exclusive Windows capture? I totally have. I don't think I've done any windows that mattered. Everything's kind of just been in here. We'll find out when I look at the recording. Anyway, this kind of filter, because in the EQ you can have all the kinds of filters, right? You can have the high pass, you can do low pass and steepers and that kind of thing, and band pass and notches and all that good stuff. So then what is the filter type that is the regular EQ behavior? And that filter type is called a peak filter. It's a filter in which you can boost it, and the resonance gets the bandwidth, and you can move it around, and then you can also go down, positive and negative, and it to create like a boost or a cut, but it doesn't pass only this area. Everything else is still there, which is important for, typical EQ function. So in like a filter, like inside the Love filter, inside Harmor, inside not so much Harmor, inside Citrus, there is a filter type that's just called the picking filter. And so I use this. I have a slightly higher resonance, so it's a bit wider, and the gain is negative, which means it's going down. I'm using it essentially to EQ out the mids. At least about it. Especially once we have distortion. It's a bit MIDI. That was entirely just the method of just EQing it because I wanted to contain this all in here. So the distortion in here in the first filter is asymmetrical. I'm also modifying the mix of the distortion with mod X so that it's more distorted higher and lower. It's the same distortion actually, but it's just fading in the dry and the wet signal. Same thing on number 2 here, but the purpose of the wave shaper on number 2 is honestly just to be a clip. This is kind of just like a method of compression, but it's not fully, permanent because we're modifying it with the mix over here, which is why we get some of the average peaks that are coming out of it. I showed you earlier. So in the effects, I have the reverb and the delay engaged. A really, really fast delay. You can see the time's really far down. But I have the volume of the effects also modulated by mod X. So that means that you can only hear the effects when it's up, and then when it's down, you can't hear it at all. This is just honestly because I didn't really like the tail. You still kind of get the tail because the animation is fast enough that you can, in this animation, you can still hear the effect from the previous version, at least in the reverb, because the delay is very short. The reverb is also very short, but it has a big room sound, which matters for its propagation. So that's where we get the effects position. You could do something like this. So we get kind of the FM, or rather the effect of the effects. So in all of this, I'm particularly fond of what's going on with number 6 here. Just because whoa, thank you, alarm. Yeah, because like the phase cancellation that it creates from the really tight unison. When you chop up continuous effects like that, like when you have the unison like this, and you can see it's like the phasing thing. If you leave it there long enough, you can tell where it's going or where it's come from, and it's not terribly interesting. But if you cut it up, it's less predictable, and it feels more unique and more engaging because it changes in ways that you aren't necessarily expecting. I mean, you might expect it because you know what's happening, and certainly I do, but like when you listen to it in a song, it's a little bit harder to keep track of that kind of stuff. So yeah, this is a fun experiment in sort of internal layering of FM. So this preset will be available to download in the description of this video. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.